Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at the Sport Modulator from Toppobrillo. The Sport Modulator is an incredibly dense module. Simply described, it's two separate lag processors with a hold circuit and the ability to cycle, but that completely understates all the functionality that's possible within the Sport Mod by a long shot. Let's quickly go over the panel and then jump right into example patches because there's going to be quite a few of them. Since the Sport Mod is primarily an integrator of signals or a lag circuit, the main controls are the lag rate, or you could think of this as the slew rate, and CV input, which will affect the slew rate. Additionally, there's a end output, which generates a gate output signal that is high when the input signal is not being lagged. If you think of this in a more musical term of like portamento, the end output would go high to low when the note is sliding, going between two notes and sliding, and then go high again once the slide ended. So basically when the lagged note reaches the input note when the signal's integrated. Lag rate simply controls how quickly it slides. The higher the setting, the faster or the shorter the slide time will be. The SH input is the control input for the hold circuit, and the mode switch determines which hold circuit mode is activated. There's either track and hold, where the gate signal at the SH input will hold the input signal voltage until the gate is released, or the hold circuit can be a sample and hold, where a gate or trigger into the SH input will trigger a new sample and simply hold whatever that sample voltage is until another gate or trigger happens at the SH input, just like a regular sample and hold would work. The cycle button will cause the input signal to be ignored and instead have the circuit self-cycle, where the frequency is controlled by the lag rate. The hold circuit and the end output will still be operational. Lastly, the center output here is a comparator output that outputs a gate high signal whenever the top half output is more positive than the lower half. At this point, you might be thinking, what? But that's totally fine. It's possible the Sport Mod is one of the most misunderstood modules in Eurorack, not necessarily because it's complicated, but because it can do so many different things once you patch it up in different ways. So it's not always easy to just like, oh, here's the input that's important, here's the output that's important, and now do the thing. There's a little bit of context that you have to have. So let's jump into the patches and see how we can make the circuit do a lot of different functions for us. Okay, so what I've patched here is I have a René sequencer going into the signal input, and then the signal output is just going into the 1 volt per octave input on the DPO. I have the lag rate turned all the way up, so it's going to be basically no lag, or the lag time is the fastest. And as I turn this down, you'll start to hear more slew or portamento. Now this knob has a huge range, so this can work on really fast changing signals or slower changing signals like a sequencer. We can get some very heavy lag all the way to so this is a good time to show you how the comparator, or I'm sorry, the end output works. So remember, this signal goes high when the input signal, or the lag signal and the input signal have caught up to each other and are the same. Basically, it's not lagging anything anymore. So as you can see, if I have this all the way up, there's really no lag happening. It's changing so fast, the signals are basically the same. As I turn this down and we start to get some lag, the signal is going to go off while the lag is in progress. In other words, it will light up, the gate signal will go high again when the note has been reached and the lag is finished, the portamento glide is done. If we have some really heavy lag, the cool thing with this is you can actually use this to extract sort of a rhythm or a tempo from audio or other sequences or anything like that. Now's a good time to show you an example of the two different hold circuits. So with the LED off, we're in track and hold mode, which means with a low signal going here, there's going to be no holding of the voltage. I've patched this into a pressure points. So as I touch the pad, it's going to generate a gate high signal here. And the gate high signal will cause the output voltage to be held. So I can just tap a pad, and for as long as I hold this pad, in other words, as long as this gate input is high, it's going to keep holding that voltage. The sequencer is still running and the input voltage is still changing, but the output is held as long as this gate is high. If I let it go, and if I play with this or have some kind of clock signal going in, you can basically extract notes out. Now the reverse of that would be a sample and hold. So if you turn the mode button on and you see the LED lit, now this is sample and hold mode, which means it's going to be holding that voltage when the signal is low. And anytime you put a gate or a trigger input, basically anytime the signal is going to go high, it'll sample a new voltage. So it almost doesn't matter what's going in here now. Whenever we send a new gate signal or pulse, like right now, it'll pick up and sample whatever voltage is going in there at that moment. So you basically have a sample and hold. If you were to put white noise in here and a clock in here, right out here you'd have your typical stepped random voltage. So if I just tap this pressure points a bunch, we'll get something that sounds pretty much like the sequence. And obviously the lag here can still apply. If there's so much lag, you'll probably never hear a change of signal. But here, if I keep tapping the pressure points, you can hear it start to waver a little bit. If you wanted to actually lag and slew the output of this, you could simply run it through the bottom half. You just have two duplicates there. All right, let's show you one of the sections cycling for LFO mode. Okay, so we're listening to the DPO triangle out again. I'm taking the output of the top half of the Sport Mod here into the exponential FM input with a little bit of attenuation. So if we start the cycling input, or cycling button, the input's ignored. We'll start to get an LFO. This becomes the speed of our LFO. So from slow all the way up into audio rate. And again, the CV input and its attenuator here control the lag time. So if we were to quickly cycle the bottom here, put that in here, we essentially have a voltage-controlled LFO controlled by another voltage-controlled LFO. But let's show you how the hold circuit works in this case. So again, now we're in track and hold mode. So what that means is it's going to just continue moving until we send a gate high, using the pressure points again, into this input. And whenever I press the pad or send it a gate high, it's going to freeze on whatever position it was in the LFO cycle. So if we were to do this fast enough, we can get a stair stepping pattern effect. We can do that with the lower half here. If we take the end output, put it in here, conversely, the sample and hold mode, again, it's going to be holding it until a gate or trigger pulse comes in here. So if I tap the pressure points again, the circuit's still cycling, and it's going to pick up on whatever voltage it's at when I tap it. In this case, because it's self-cycling and it's not slewing an input, it's going to drastically change what you're sampling. So at audio rates, it won't be fully random like noise. It'll be closer to a sine wave, but it's going to sound a little random. And of course, you could always patch noise in here and turn it off self-cycling mode if you wanted to. But that's the difference between track and hold and sample and hold. Let's take a look at the comparator here, since we have both of these cycling. So again, the comparator is going to go high when the top half output is more positive than the lower half's output, and then go negative in the opposite case. If we enlist this handy LED cable here, you can see when it's white, that's the negative high signal. And when it's red, that's the positive high signal. And you can do this to extract rhythms from these two LFOs, which is a very cool usage. So you could have these two sort of doing a slow cycle of filters or FM amounts or anything like that, and be deriving a clock that is sort of synchronized between these two cycles. Okay, here's an example of using each half of the Sport Mod as a voltage-controlled clock divider. So I have each in cycle mode and in sample and hold mode, so the LED is lit for each channel. They're both basically at the same lag rate, which basically sets our division. And I'm using two channels from pressure points to individually set the division rates of each one. The sample SH inputs, the same clock signal is going into both of these, and this is the clock signal we're going to be dividing down. So this could be your MIDI clock, or I'm just using a maths that's cycling, but any steady clock, patch into each SH input, same signal. And then our outputs, the end is going to be clock 1, and the end of this output is going to be clock 2. So now if we change rows on the pressure points, basically changing what our division is going to be, get new rhythms. And of course, this could be driven by a sequencer. It doesn't have to be pressure points. We could even send the same voltage to these if we wanted to, and use these as offsets. So this channel is always dividing by a different amount than this channel. We could even, instead of using a MIDI clock or some sorts, put a square wave into this and tune this to get two sub-octave signals. The comparator output here is also very useful in the divider case. Okay, here we have, I don't really have a name for this. It's something along the lines of the Woggle Bug and the Surge step smooth random generator kind of idea. We're using both halves here. One half, the top half is our stepped random out, and the bottom half is our smooth random out. The way we set that up is we're taking any kind of noise source. It could be white noise, I'm using the ring mod out of the Wogglebug. You could sample or use the just straight output of the whole patch, really anything, but you want to have something that's kind of noisy so it's more on the random side, going into the input on the top. Then you want to take the end output of the top and patch that into the SH input on the bottom, and you want to turn on sample mode on the bottom. Sample mode should also be on the top, and that SH input, that gets our main clock. So whatever you'd clock the stepped at, that's going to go in here. The neat little trick here is taking the comparator out and patching that into the lower half input. So really what we're sampling on the lower half input is the comparator going up or down. And key is having the lag rate pretty low. You kind of have to tune it and find the range you want. Higher is going to be more fluctuation, lower is going to be a little more smooth and wavery. And then the output, of course, is the smoothed output. And the top output is the stepped output. I usually set the lag time all the way up on there. You can play around a little bit with your CV inputs to add a little bit of correlation and things like that. I'm not here just to make the example simpler. And the last cool bit is I like taking the end out of the smooth output. This kind of creates a random burst gate, but it's pretty correlated to the tempo of the incoming clock. It's definitely not synced or anything, but it feels tighter than if the gates were totally random. And I'll let you listen to this. So the smoothed out is going to the timbre or the shape control in the DPO. So you hear it get buzzier and smoother. The stepped random out is changing stages on Renee. And lastly, the sort of semi-random correlated gate burst out is opening a second Optimix with a real high frequency triangle wave sound. This is reducing the lag on the smooth. All right, we'll finish up with this patch. It's not particularly complicated, but it's one of my favorites and one I tend to use very often with the Sport Mod. It's basically just using both halves as sample and hold generators. So I'm taking the noise out of the telharmonic, but again, you could use any kind of noise source, and that's going into input 1 and multed into input 2 of the input on the lower half. The clock signals are coming from a tempi. I often like to clock the upper and lower halves differently. They're in sample and hold mode, as you can see. Cycling is most definitely off. And your lag time kind of depends. I usually have them around 9 o'clock for slower signals. There's a little bit of smoothing there. But what I do like to do is mult each of the outputs back into the CV input and add a little bit there. It adds kind of like this organic shifting thing where the random voltage coming out of here will slightly adjust the slew time and thus change it a little bit. I just kind of like how the tonality of that sounds. So what we're doing here is taking the end outputs of each one and going into the strike input of each of 2 channels on the Optimix, and we're listening to 2 channels of the DPO. These stepped outputs, random outputs of each, are going to the control, the amplitude volume on each channel of the Optimix. And it's running through some delay and reverb. I'll let that play us out. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you give this guy a good try and a spin. It's really worth it, not only just for the utility functions, but having random voltage, slew, LFOs, especially if you like doing any kind of ambient patches, or even if you're really into like patch programmability, like the Surge, where you have some basic functions, and depending on how you patch the module, you can get very different results from it. It's an amazing module. It's very small. It's only 12 HP for what you get out of it. It's fantastic. Thanks a lot, everybody.